So the format of today's meeting is I will give a brief introduction on what notarial archives are, or rather what notaries are, because we don't really have those so much in the Anglosphere, and then very briefly touch on English notarial archives, of which there's not very much. Luca will discuss Italian archives, and then Ton will follow up discussing Amsterdam, and if there's time, perhaps also touching on Belgium and France. So, where to begin? I think, like most people from English-speaking countries, was not particularly aware of notarial archives until some years ago. I went to Brazil to work for a period of time, and before I went, I had to have documents notarized, officially translated, and so forth. And then when I got there, I had to enter apostilled as well. That's when you get a document, an official document, its origin confirmed by the government. And then when I got to Brazil, I had to go and find myself a notarial, a local notary, of which there was a lot. And essentially, you just choose one. And the notary then had to look through all my documents to be sure that he knew who I was, and especially my signature. And that meant that when I signed a contract with my internet service provider, I could go along to the notary. They could look at what I had put on the document and were able then just to stamp it. And the internet service provider knew that I was who I claimed to be, and they could then set up my account for me. And this is, I think, how things very much used to happen in lower trust societies. And I'm afraid in a country like Brazil, you have quite a lot of visits to a notary. So I suppose the first question to ask is, what is a notary? And we're particularly talking about continental Western Europe, and necessarily I'm going to generalize. But a notary is a public legal official. That's to say, a notary has some kind of official status, is trained in law and record keeping, so is essentially a lawyer. And the key thing, as we just saw in the Brazilian example, is that a notary is trusted to act impartially. So a notary is an honest broker, so that within a lower trust society, you can all deal with each other with a greater degree of confidence. And for people who have assets, of course, this is particularly important. So what does notary actually do? Well, they were drafting legal documents and then reading them aloud to the parties, because obviously some people were illiterate. And also, if you've had the document read aloud to you, you can't claim ignorance of what is in it. And then the notary, as we saw in the Brazilian example, needs to confirm everyone's identities and that they consent to what is being agreed. And then they execute and authenticate the act and enter this into an official register. And that essentially makes what is being discussed official, in a way that a contract, perhaps in England, that you would sign between two people is something private. It's not officially registered. So what sort of documents are we talking about? All the sorts of documents you would expect. So sort of financial documents, things like wills, powers of attorney, marriage contracts, business partnerships, properties, and so forth. So why did they matter? The acts that the notaries have entered into the register have full legal force, so they're valid without a court. So in England or of course in America, you would need to go to a court to enforce it, whereas you don't necessarily need to do that with a notary. And theoretically, of course, the records are kept permanently, although of course records can be lost over the years. And so sorry, I just jumped ahead. What that can mean is suppose I have just died somewhere and I have assets in a foreign country. You can then go and get a copy of my will, have it translated and so forth, and then sent to another country. And we'll actually see an example of that a bit later. And why does this matter for genealogy? I think the obvious thing to say is people go to notaries to look after their own personal financial interests. So they tend to be very honest and very precise. And if you compare this perhaps to Inquisition processos, uh, people are obviously saying they're often saying misleading things. Whereas I think generally speaking, you can trust what they tell a notary. And also, of course, sometimes where other documents have been lost, notarial documents will survive. There is, though, a country in Western Europe that did things differently. And that, of course, is Britain, or particularly England. And the English system relies on people called scriveners, who are somewhere, I think, between a sort of lawyer and a scribe. And this is just traditional practice. So it would be the scrivener who drafted the legal document. Some scriveners could also be a notary public. A notary public, though, is a lesser beast than a notary in continental Europe, and their job is principally just authenticating documents that can be sent abroad. But the thing to note about the scriveners is that they don't have that same legal authority as the notaries in continental Europe have. And because of that, we have another problem that when a scrivener ceases being in business, then there is no authority that mandates the preservation of documents. And of course, this is why uh, there are so few of these notarial documents in England compared to places like the Netherlands. So Scriveners were and are still organized in the Worshipful Company of Scriveners, and they have a rather nice hall not terribly far from Bevis Mark's synagogue. And it's unfortunate for us that obviously their services were almost certainly greatly used by Portuguese Jewish families in London, or at least the wealthier ones. But the records have almost exclusively or almost totally disappeared. And the company of scriveners themselves, their own archives are essentially limited to some of their administrative documents, those are membership lists, apprentices, and so forth. Um, and of course, Jews were not admitted until quite late, so unfortunately not terribly useful for us. But if you want to go and look at the records, you can find them in the London Archives, formerly the London Metropolitan Archives. So, I mean, how are these records useful for us in Sephardic research? I think when we go on to look at other countries, we'll see there's a mass of data. And here we have virtually nothing. There is no kind of notarial archive we can go to. But as we'll now see, there are records surviving within other sources. First of which is the Court of Chancery. So in England, courts evolved from the medieval period, and sometimes courts had overlapping jurisdictions, in which case the Court of Chancery would step in. And the Court of Chancery was also the court that was involved in disputes involving overseas heirs, which, of course, for Sephardic Jews is something quite important. So this is a court. So we have court records here, but of course the notarial records, the scrivener records, which would then still survive, were important evidence. So you would bring your copy of your scrivener records if it is relevant, and this would then be read into the court record and used by the court in its adjudication. And so here's, for example, is an example. These records are at the National Archives of a case, De Castro versus De Castro. This particular case went on for about 40 years, and I guess at the end, the only people who benefited probably were the lawyers. But if you go to the National Archives and you order this file, what you essentially get is something that looks like a huge roll of wallpaper with scrolls inside scrolls, and you take it to a huge desk and you unravel it and lay it down, and it will tell you the court case. But hopefully, if you're lucky, within there, you're also going to find the various notarial records on which the court case is largely resting. So notary publics are, or rather were, licensed by the faculty office of the Archbishop of Canterbury, because of course the church traditionally were the literate people, and therefore that just carried on. Unfortunately, this archive also doesn't have the records, the notarial records that we might seek. Another source, though, that is overlooked is the Commissary Court of London, and they handle the probate records, wills and things for the less well-off people. And until quite recently, you just had to go up to the London Metropolitan Archives, but these have recently been scanned by Ancestry.com. So here, for example, we see the 1705 will of Aaron de Chavez, who was a bit shaky when he wrote it, and you can see here that he is leaving his wealth to his three children, Esther, Rebecca, and David, and he puts his brother-in-law as the executor, David Nunez Sierra, and again, Tom and I were discussing this a week ago, that from a European perspective, this is probably a notarial record. Perhaps from an English perspective, it's more of a probate, but still useful to us. And another court which can be helpful is the High Court of the Admiralty, which, as the name suggests, has authority over maritime matters. And of course, our ancestors were merchants. Unfortunately, like a lot of these other records, it's mostly not been scanned or indeed indexed. But to give you an example of something that's particularly interesting, if should it touch your family, are prize disputes. So suppose I am an English pirate sailing out of Plymouth on the south coast, and I seize your merchant ship going down the English Channel and claim it as a prize, and say you're French. You can then come to the prize court and say, this is not true. We are Portuguese. We are an ally of Britain. So give me my stuff back. And here's a nice little example of that. It's captured ship, the Demoiselle Elizabeth, whose master was Jacob van Moses de Castro. So I think fairly obviously one of ours. And this ship was a Dutch schooner in 1779, so during the American War of Independence. Had a crew of 6, and it was sailing from Saint Domingue, that's Haiti, to Curacao. with a cargo of coffee and indigo. It got caught by a loyalist privateer captained by Stuart Ross, who took it to New York. And at the court in New York, De Castro is arguing that he's a Dutch flagged ship and the Netherlands is not at war with England, so give it back. And again, you'll be very lucky, to be honest, to find a case involving a member of your family. But if you do, there's generally a lot of information there. And the final court to discuss is the one people will be most familiar with, the prerogative Court of Canterbury. So again, under the Archbishop of Canterbury. And these records are held at the National Archives. Probably people are familiar with the wills there, which if you can sort of log on to the account, you can see at no cost. And these are wills of wealthier members of the community. So, for example, here we can see the will of Ribka Nunez Carvalho, alias Nunez Henriquez, widow of Amsterdam from 1731. And if we look here at the first page, first thing to notice is that this has been entered into a book. This is not the original will, and the original will has presumably been lost, but because the Prerogative Court of Canterbury entered it, it has the record. And this is, if you look at the top, translated out of Low Dutch. Which tells us that probably if we go to the Amsterdam archives, we might find more information on Ribka. But the point is, I'm afraid for the archives in London is, first of all, England did things differently, and because the scriveners didn't have official status, most of the records have been lost. And also, it's a bit of a potluck if you are looking for anything. But the good news is that if you go to other countries in Europe, you can find very much more. And can now hand over to Luca.
Thank you, David. So my presentation will be on archival sources for the history of the Jewish people in Italy, and obviously mainly about Sephardic Jews. Next slide, please. So Italy has a huge variety of archival sources, which contain a lot of interesting and valuable information about the history of Sephardic Jews. The problem is not, let's say, the quantity. The problem is that this information can be spread in a huge amount of different places. So as you know, we had important Sephardic community, which were found, amongst other, in Venice, Ferrara, Livorno, Ancona, and so on. However, let's say that the important sources for their study can be found in many, many different places. And sometimes, imagine that you are looking for information about the Sephardic Jews of Ancona. You will not, most of the archival sources which would be of interest to you, will not be in Ancona, they will be in Rome. And the same for Livorno. In Livorno, if you go at the State Archives of Livorno, you will not find much. But in Florence, there will be a lot of material about Sephardic Jews living in Livorno. So here you have three major sources, or I divided them in groups. One group is the archives of Italian states and town. A second group is the Jewish communities historical archives. And a third group are archives belonging to the church. So we have three groups, but then the situation gets even more complicated. Next slide, please. Let's start with Italian state archives. You have the Archivio Centrale dello Stato, so the state archives, and this includes in their collection laws and privilege granted to Jews or letters of political or religious authority on Jewish issues, trade regulation affecting Jews, concessions given to Jews, economic issues, pleas made by Jews, decrees concerning Jews, taxes at national level paid by Jews, and so on. So you have in both in Archivio Centrale dello Stato or in, which is the central one, or in Archivio di Stato di, it means State Archive of this town, this or that town, you have all this information. But then also you have Archivio Storico del Comune di, so you have in the same town, you might have at the same time a state archive and the historical archive of the same place, of the same town. And in historical archive, you normally found letters or concerning local commercial transaction, population censuses, political correspondence, but also civil trials, criminal cases, local privilege granted to Jews, issues concerning the slaughtering of animals, which are of course of main very important for Jews, and so on. And then you also have what we call Archivio Notarile Antico di in the same town and Archivio Antico. So in a same town, you can have 3 or 4 different archives, which all contains issues relating to to Jews which had lived there in the past. If you are lucky, sometimes you are lucky, because these sometimes this information is divided in series, okay? And sometimes there are series which is called Mazzo Ebrei, Inventari Ebrei, Materia Ebrei. So someone in the past has gathered all the information concerning the Jewish community and put them in special mazzo, or which means a pile of documents and so on. So if you're lucky, you go to a town and then they have already themselves all the information which concern the Jewish community and the Jews in the past, because someone at some stage decided to put them all together. Okay, so this is very important if you are, and it saves you a lot of time, frankly. Next slide, please. These are the church has also a lot of material. There is a panoply of different cases in them. You can have archives in cathedrals of XXX means any town, or in curia, or in a historical archive belonging to a bishop or an archbishop. You also have the Archivio della Congregazione della Fede. These were issues concerning religious issues and doctrinal issues concerning Jews, which are Jewish religion, which is also very important for the church. You have also Archivio Diocesano, because let's say the territory is divided in diocesi. So it means that you don't have, let's say, a church in a single place. You have a whole diocese, which is a territory which includes many towns, okay, or a number of towns. And then you have Archivio Storico del Vicariato, the vicary, or Archivio Segreto Vaticano, the Vatican secret archive. Simonson, who did the huge job about the Jews in many volumes concerning the history of Jews in the state of the Holy See, he got most of the information for the secret archive of the Vatican, which of course you cannot just access like this. You have to go there and ask for permission and so on. So this is to say that not only you can find lots of stuff in archives belonging to government, to the state in general, but also from the archives of the church, which are also very much where you can find a lot of information. Next slide, please. So, for instance, let's take for a second the case of Pisa. Okay, imagine that you want to study the history, the long history of the Jewish Sephardic community in Pisa, and let's imagine that you're interested in census data. Okay, so you have basically you look for census data of the past. You have one census in 1595, and then you have two censuses, one in 1642, one in 1689. All this information is in different places. You will not find it in the same place. The census of 1595, you will find information in Archivio della Congregazione della Fede, which belongs to the church, because it was done. It was done, and here you find, let's say, all the whole Jewish population in Pisa of 1595, with complementary information where they came from or where they went. Okay, so the church was interested in knowing, let's say, how many Jews were in Pisa at some stage, divided into families, and so on. And then next census we have is in the one of 1642, and this was drawn for tax reasons. You will find this in Archivio di Stato of Florence, and let's say the information attached to every member, every family, was what was the profession of the head of the family, and also there was an estimation of how rich they were, because of course they were this census was done for taxation purposes. And then, but the census of 1689 you will find in a third place, which is in Archivio di Stato di Pisa. So sometimes there is no logic. It's just a matter of, let's say, you have to research where you find relevant information, even in the case that you are looking for, let's say, the same sort of information, like let's find census data about the population or Jewish population of Pisa in the 16th and 17th century. Next slide. And sorry, and before we go to next slide, I also want to say that the same is for Livorno. If you exclude the information, which we'll see it later on, which is online and which comes from the Jewish Historical Archives of Livorno, you will find more information about the Jews in Livorno in the archive in Florence, in the State Archive in Florence, not in the State Archives of Livorno. So you always have to to try to think about where this information can be, who were the political powers at the time, and so on. Next, sorry, and then also about Ancona. I'm trying to research the history of the Jewish community in Ancona, and I found you can find important information in at least 10 different archives in Ancona and in Rome. Plus, Ancona is in a special situation because, let's say, all information which were in the historical archive of the Ancona Jewish community was moved to Jerusalem in Israel. So you will find, for instance, census data not in Ancona or in Rome, but you will find it in the Central Archive for the History of Jewish People in Jerusalem. But you will find also relevant information in Dubrovnik and Marseille. Why in the archives of Dubrovnik and Marseille? Because of the trade. I mean, the Jewish community of Ancona was a community mainly of traders. And of course, they were trading with Marseille, with Dubrovnik. And then you find interesting stuff about Jewish trade from Ancona in those two archives. Okay, then something is, of course, you can go to these archives in Italy. You ask for an appointment, you tell them you're coming, and then, well, have the experience of Florence. You can ask for 5 sets of document fields, we call it sets of documents a day, because they have to prepare it for the day before, and then you look inside what's in it. But recently they start to digitalize also archives in Italy. So they're not completely digitalized, but there are parts of them are digitalized, and in some cases important parts. And the best source for this, it's Archivio Digitale. That's the name of the project. So you go on the internet, and then this is the website, and then you will see that you have 46 state archives all over Italy, which have been partially digitalized and available for researchers. Unfortunately, important Jewish Sephardic community like Ferrara and Livorno, they have not even started to digitalize the state archives of Ferrara and Livorno. But you will find Ancona, you will find Florence, you will find Genova, you will find Rome, and other places where you had Jewish community, Sephardic Jewish community there. Next one, please. So you go on the website of this Archivio Digitale. We saw the web address before. You choose which archives you want to, which state archives you want to check, and then you can go either by, let's say, topic or by word. Okay. So, for instance, I went to the digital archive to the state archive of Ancona, and I wrote the word Ebrei, which means Jews. Okay. I found documents from 1551 to 1709. They were about dowries, taxes, commercial litigation, and so on. However, if instead of Jews, I write down Ebrei, I write down Ebreo, Jew, singular, male singular, because Ebrea is female singular, I find other documents because, of course, the way they do it is that you write a word and then this word must be either somewhere in the document or in the description of the document. So if you write Jew or Jews, you have different set of documents. Okay, Hebreo is the is the present word for Jews, but we're talking about also we went in the past. Jews were also called Judei, which I know that in English Jew sounds a perfectly normal word, or juif in French, but Judeo in Italian it's a slur. It's a word no one would use. But because in the past it was used, you also have to look for Judeo, Judea, Judei, and you will find other documents. And the same for Israelita, Israeliti, Hebraico, Hebraico, and so on. So basically, when you're looking for documents, you have to try all these words and then try to see what comes out. And what comes out is different from word to word. That's the way it works. So to finish with Ancona, I tried this word, I found some documents, but then I did the same with the State Archive of Rome, not of Ancona, and I found huge amount, many more documents about Ancona because, in fact, you put the two words together. You put, for instance, Ebreo, Ancona, and then the amount of documents I found were 10 times more the one I found in Ancona, because of course Ancona was belonging to the Holy See, to the state of the Holy See, and therefore you have a lot of documents. Documentation was in Rome because that was the capital of the state of the church. So this is to say that not only you have to, you have also to think where these documents concerning Jews of Ancona can be found. I would also look in Ferrara, for instance, because, well, Ferrara I can't actually, because Ferrara is not yet digitalized. But I would also look at the towns in Italy where Jews of Ancona were trading with. Okay. Next, please. You also have Jewish community digitalized resources. Let's look at the example of Livorno. Okay, you have now all of this has been digitalized. You have copies of letters sent by the community between 17 and 1847, minutes of the meetings of the community governing body. You have all sorts of documents which concern the Jewish community of Livorno. These are digitalized now, and you will find it on the internet. Okay, I tried to access earlier. I couldn't access because there was some problem, but it's you can look at. I've looked at them myself in the past. I was mostly interested in birth, death, and so on, and everything is. You have all births record from 1668, deaths from 1715. And you had also, for instance, decrees, edicts, statutes, regulation, and so on. So this is you can find a wealth of information about the Jewish community in Livorno, which is already digitalized. Next, please. No, that's yours. Okay. So no, I want to. In fact, yeah. So if you have So this was just a small practical introduction of what you can find in Italy and how to proceed. And if you have further question, you have uh, my web address there. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Today I want to give a short orientation to the Amsterdam Notarial Archives. What they are, why they matter, and how you actually find your way around them. Amsterdam had a dense and highly professional notarial culture from the late 16th century onward. For historians, genealogists, and anyone interested in social or economic history, these records are gold. Today, the notarial archives are preserved by the Amsterdam City Archives and accessible online through archief.amsterdam. And that website is your main entry point, but it can feel overwhelming. And this is the main entrance to the notarial archives. The number that you need to remember is 5075. That's the number of this archive. There are lots of other archives. They have different numbers. And it starts and ends with a list of 580 notaries that functioned in Amsterdam from the late 16th century to until roughly 1910. The names you see are not ordered alphabetically but chronologically. Jan Jans Pilorius is simply the first notary of which records have been preserved, and Edward de Veers the second. Sephardic Jews began to enter the city in 1595. And the magazine Studia Rosa Italiana has a series of abstracts of notarial deeds running from that year, 1595, until circa 1633. That series was supposed to go on until 1639, but for some reason that stopped in 1633. Uh, the archive is the archives are not perfectly intact. Some notaries' archives are missing altogether because their protocols were lost before they even reached the city archive. In other cases, the registers do survive but are damaged. And parts of it were damaged in two separate fires. First in 1652 and the next one in 1762. In both cases, fire and also extinguishing water took their toll on the number of notarial registers. Here you see to the left Tixerandet, who had a lot of Portuguese clients. And you can see that the edges of this register have been eaten away by fire. And the same goes for Battle, who is on the right. But these losses are the exception, not the rule. The Amsterdam Notarial Archive is remarkably complete by early modern standards. A crucial point is accessibility. A large part of the notarial archive has been digitized, meaning you no longer have to work exclusively with physical volumes on the spot, but scans of registers, and they are becoming increasingly available online. which has completely changed how research is done. If you want up-to-date numbers, you can go to the site Alle Amsterdamse Akten, and there you can see how many notaries have been digitized. That's 188. 1,200,000 plus documents have been indexed, and somewhat less have been checked. And after they have been indexed and checked, they are put online with the indexes. And at this moment, there are 1,830 people, volunteers, indexing those archives. 188 is roughly 1/3 of the notaries. And of those 188, 36% have been digitized, and 82% of the digitized notaries have been indexed. In the past, several people have made brave and often heroic attempts to make inroads into the Amsterdam Notarial archives. One of them was Herbert Bloom. He wrote a book entitled Economic Activities of the Jews of Amsterdam in the 17th and 18th century. Essentially, his book is a rebuke to the theories of Werner Sambar, who claimed that Jews had a very central role in the Amsterdam economic world of Amsterdam. And what Herbert Bloom did was check the notarial archives for the economic activities of the Jews, and he concluded that it was not as large scale as Sombar posted. Another figure was Samuel Oppenheim, and he worked extensively on Dutch colonial archives, including notaries, the Dutch West Indian Company. He wrote about Brazil, New Netherlands, Suriname. New Netherlands became New York. And he used the Amsterdam notarial material to reconstruct commercial networks and immigration patterns long before this was fashionable. And in one revealing anecdote, he wrote that he was furious at the Amsterdam archivists because they refused to tell him which notaries were the ones that Jewish clients went to. So not all was as open then in the 1930s as it is now. Another fascinating figure is Abraham Mordechai Vaz Diaz. By profession, he was a cigar manufacturer. By inclination, he was an autodidact scholar with wide-ranging interests, including Spinoza and Sephardic intellectual history. And he spent years mining notarial records, extracting names, contracts, and family relations. His work was unsystematic by modern standards, but often based on direct archival reading and remarkable persistence. And he jotted down his findings in cahiers, of which a lot have survived and have been put online by the Amsterdam archives. Lydia Hooghoort abstracted those abstracts into an index, which you see here in the middle at the bottom. And that index is also to be found online, both the cahiers of Vazdias and this index you can find in handschriften on the Amsterdam City Archives website. And finally, there's Simon Hart, who is impossible to ignore. From 1929, he was connected to the Amsterdam Municipal Archive, first as a volunteer, later as a professional archivist, and eventually from 1974 to 1976 as city archivist. He produced a partial index to the Amsterdam Notarial Archives, covering roughly 10% of the total of the Amsterdam Notarial Archives from the beginning, late 16th century, until circa 1800. And there are tens of thousands of these cards which contain abstracts of notarial deeds. And these also have been digitized and can be found online. This one is about Abraham Cohen and David Nassi, and it's about slavery. But about 10 years ago, the Amsterdam City Archives made the decisive shift in approach. Instead of selective indexing or small pilot projects, it committed itself to the systematic digitization and indexing of the entire Amsterdam Notarial Archives. Given the size of the material, this was and still is an enormous undertaking. And there are three research strategies that you can employ to research the archives. That's through indexing, through Research Amsterdam, and through inventarissen. And the first one, indexing, is based on is done by volunteers who are reading the Amsterdam Notarial Archives and extracting names, dates, notaries, the subject of a notarial deed, and they put them online. Each notary is put online only after it has been completely indexed. And you can find that index on the Amsterdam website. You can search for names. You can search for notary. You can search for place names, and the searching is made more flexible through the use of special signs like an asterisk for a letter. For example, some deeds do not mention Cohen, like here, but Kozen, and that's because it has been read falsely as an S. If you insert an asterisk instead of an H, you find Cohen and Kozen. Or you can use a tilde after the last name, and that gives you a fuzzy research. And by now, 1.2 million notarial documents have been indexed. And I think there may be something like 10 to 20 million documents left. So it's a vast task indeed. The second thing that the Amsterdam City Archives did is they put when they had digitized notaries, all the registers of one notary through transcribus. And they have a collaborative website with transcribus, and there you can search for names or actually the whole text of a document. So you can fill in testament or last will or other search terms, and it will search through the entire document. And then it will present those documents in order of how many hits it could find within one document. If Cohen has been named 20 times in the document, then that's at the top of the list. If it has been named once, it's at the end of the list. At this moment, this website is somewhat unstable. It used to be that you could narrow your search down by the name of the notary, but that doesn't work at this moment, and I hope they will sort it out soon. And the third method is, and here we are back at slide number 2, you go to the notaries themselves and you plow your way through 20 million pages of digitized documents. But there is a method to do this. If you click on the name of a notary, then and click through to the actual registers, most notaries have an index, either in the back or at the front, and sometimes in the middle. For example, if a register covers 2 years, you might find the index to the first year in the middle and the index to the second year at the end. And mostly these are on given name. So that's a lot of work to go through them, but it's very worthwhile to do this. And sometimes a notary like Barels or Genitz has been organized on last name that works much faster. But this is something I wouldn't recommend for the average genealogist whose time is limited. And you can wait until the indexing is done, which maybe takes another 10 years, or when everything has been put through transcribus, which also will take a long time. In the meantime, go ahead and plunge right in and report your results to me. Then we can all learn something from that. What types of notarial deeds you can find? Wills and testaments, instructions for the distribution of property after death, often naming relatives, etc., marriage contracts, agreements setting out property regimes, dowries, inheritance arrangements, especially important before marriage. Then powers of attorney, mostly to do with business. And there are commercial contracts and partnerships, debt instruments and loans, acknowledgements of debt, bonds, mortgages, etc. And then inventories of estates, that again is valuable for genealogists, and because you can see what people did own in terms of material artifacts and or bonds, government contracts, etc., etc. And then there's the declarations and testimonies, and these cover a wide range of subjects like business, but also uh, street fights, uh, fights between neighbors, fights between husband and wife, matrimonial strife, and they might contain declarations about times long ago, based on the evidence of witnesses aged 70, 80, 90 years old who remember things from the past. And then uh, you might find information about family on Jamaica that you would not find otherwise. I think we've gone long enough, but one last thing that I would like to share is the last wills that you can find through transcribus are presented like this: the original on the left, the transcript on the right, and the text on the right you can copy or download and then put it into AI like ChatGPT, and then you can ask ChatGPT to clean it up to correct mistakes. The only thing that you have to be aware of is that things like places, names of persons, names of places, and dates, you have to correct yourself because ChatGPT is not good at that. But the text itself uh, gains in clarity by putting it through AI. And once you have done that, you can ask it to translate the Dutch text or the Spanish text or the Portuguese text into English or another language of your choice, and it will make an excellent translation of this. That is, after you have corrected the names of persons, places, and dates yourself. And after that, you can ask it to analyze the text, and that gives you, in a moment's instance, a very clear feel for what the document is about and what its various components are. I'll leave it at this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anybody has any questions or comments, please raise your digital hand. I actually have a question for Luca, because the sheer size and complexity of archives in Italy has just got me thinking about, what one might do. I mean, I suppose every archive is its own story, but I wonder if it might theoretically be possible in a few years, when everything is scanned and we've got AI and whatever, to actually start mapping and tracking the arrival of Iberian Jews onto the Italian peninsula, especially the sort of later waves of Portuguese Jews, or is that just going to be a complete fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the problem here is that you have a huge number of different archives
Yeah.
on one side, and then the amount of document digitalized is not so great now, not so high. But yes, of course, as more and more archives are digitalized, state archives especially, then it should be possible to do so. I mean, we already have some people who have dealt years during archives, for instance, the huge amount of Aaron Di Leone on Ferrara, and then you have now a very good. He collected and published hundreds of documents on Sephardic Jews in Ferrara. So for some communities, this is already the case. For others, much less. We don't know so much about the arrival of Portuguese Jews in Ancona. The best evidence we have actually is through the commercial undertakings they were having with Ferrara, because Ancona and Ferrara were cities which are very much connected from a trading point of view. But again, so we don't, we know, of course, that the Portuguese community came to an end in Ancona in the 16th century because of they were unfortunately, tragically, 24 of them were burned at stake, and more than 100 of them were condemned to row on galleys, and so that spelled the end of the Portuguese community in Ancona. So the situation is very much different from town to town. But yes, I mean, the more in a situation in which the number of documents digitalized will increase progressively, that's going to be a very important tool for studying the history and the beginning of the history of Sephardic Judaism in Italy.
Thank you. Because at an earlier talk today, the Jewish Genealogical Society of Great Britain, Adam Brown was talking about the history of the ancestors of Moses Montefiore, saying that genetics shows they have Romagnot origins, and one just wonders how far back these archives go, and whether we can start matching stuff, which will probably happen very, very soon within the next few years because of the speed of AI. Adam, sorry, you wanted to say something?
Well, I wanted to say we don't know if it's Romagnot or Italkim. It's sort of difficult to distinguish between them.
Yeah.
But it's certainly part of that Romagnot Italkim ancestry, which we find very commonly.
Thank you.
Okay.
Judith, do you want to unmute?
Thank you, David. I just have two simple things. Adam, could you put your email address so everyone can see it, especially me? And I wanted to know if Luca especially has any information of the Penso family.
Luca, you're muted.
Okay. Well, you catch me by surprise, of course, but I said the Penso family is Penso is an Italian. I mean, there was Jews in Italy called Penso. I think the best we can do is that if you write to me, I will look at all my documentation and I will answer you.
Oh, thank you
I
so
think it
much.
would be more efficient, and then I can
Sure.
look properly into all my files. Yes.
Thank you so much. I have a close DNA match with them. From two Pensos, a father and son, who lived in Los Angeles. I'm, 98% Ashkenazi, but I have a match with them. I'm about 2-3% Sephardi. So thank you. I will contact you.
Contact me too.
I will. Thank
Okay.
you. I'm
You're
looking. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
well, everyone.
You will.
Thank you. Bernard.
Thank you. Thanks for the various presentations. This was going to start off as a question specifically to Luca, but I think that it's one that Ton may be able to answer as well. I've been fascinated over the period of discovering family history through genealogy of the role of universities in the integration of the Jews. And I think I've mentioned to you before, Luca, the University of Padua and the medical school in particular. would they be more useful to investigate through their own archives, or is it also something that is worth looking at their notarial archives? And I have basically the same question to Ton about the same process in the Netherlands.
I start maybe. We have a, I think we have a clear and full idea of Jews who, well, maybe not full, but let's say that we have one book in particular I'm thinking of. There is a list of Jewish, all Jews who indeed attended the University of Padua to study medicine, and the information includes also where they come from and and who were what they studied and so on. So there is one volume in particular where we find this information. I maybe it's not fully complete. Maybe at the very beginning, maybe you have. I think it starts from the 16th century. Sorry, the 17th century. The 17th century,
Mhm.
and then it goes on. But so the point is, yes, maybe you also have some information about Jews, of course, in the archives of the university themselves, because they keep their own records. So this is one thing we could look at.
Thanks. I was wondering in particular because looking at Spain, for example, where you have a lot of the new Christians who were basically Jews who were admitted to Spanish universities, and by searching family names and names of medical or other families that that had been involved in academia, it may be that there turn out to have been quite a lot of links which weren't necessarily indicating that the people studying were Jewish. So it was kind of thinking partly of that.
Yes, but in Padova they were indicated
Yeah.
as Jews, so we don't have this problem.
Okay, thanks.
In the Netherlands, I would look more at university archives than at notarial archives.
Okay, thanks.
Lists of students are available for few universities in the Netherlands. The ones from Leiden have been published. The ones from Utrecht are not published, but they are online and they contain indeed quite a number of Jewish students. For people of a medical profession who studied at universities, you can look at the Guild Archives of Amsterdam, the Guild of Doctors, and the Guild of Surgeons. And they have lists of members that mention Jews as Judeus. And they also mention at which university they studied,
Thank you.
all online.
Thank you. Amelia, you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question primarily for Luca. So I have a family that I've been studying. The earliest record I have is a 1658 Ketubah register from Livorno. Um, and they were under the surname Mizrahi, but as they moved throughout the rest of the Western European world, it became clear that they used Mizrahi and Carcass, or Carcassonne or Corcus, the somewhat notable family, interchangeably. And so my question is, where do you recommend looking for the earliest records from Livorno, sort of pre-1650, for any hints of members of this family? For example, people who were on the Mamad or had other positions. I know you posted on your slides some resources, but if you could make that a bit richer, I'd appreciate it.
Luca, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry. I was saying that you have the book of Ariel Toaf, even if it's let's say a bit outdated, but he published a lot of documents from the about the Jews in Livorno from the end of the 16th century. So this is before your period. And then you also have what was published by I don't remember the name now, but Nejar, yes, about Alain Nejar and his wife, about all the marriages in the Jewish community of Livorno, where you will find several Mizrahi there. So it's Nejar, Nedjar, and you have. But if you write to me, I can also look at. I have the book, and I can look if I find something significant for you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Judith, sorry, Tom. Sorry.
Well, there are also the books by Renzo Toaf and by Lionel Levy.
Yes.
They have lots of genealogical references and lots of names. Judith?
I would just like to add to the knowledge of Padua. There was a famous yeshiva in Padua, and some of the Jewish medical students would study at both locations. And they specifically chose Padua Medical School because they could also continue their yeshiva studies.
Thank you.
Yes. By the way, Tom, by the way, Renzo Toaf and Ariel Toaf is the same person. Renzo was his name in Italy, and then the Hebrew name is Ariel, and then he moved to Israel. So, you can find it
Okay.
with both names.
Thank you.
So we might have reached the end of our questions. We had rather optimistically also hoped to have somebody to.
You're frozen, David. David was saying that whilst optimistically, we also invited someone to talk about Belgian archives and French archives. But unfortunately, that person couldn't attend. A short word about Belgian notarial archives and French notarial archives. And France, a lot of notarial archives are online. Unfortunately, I know of no initiative to index them. So you are on your own there. Maybe you can join the Genealogical Jewish Society of France, Genealogy. They have a lot of knowledgeable people who may be able to help you. And for Belgium, I would point to the Antwerp archives. In Antwerp, there was a large Nation Portuguese, consisting of Portuguese merchants, many of whom were Jews or New Christians. And they figure prominently in Antwerp notarial archives. And these archives are all online, but not indexed. And if you're lucky, you have a notary that has an index in front of a register or at the back of a register, and you can take your cue from there. It seems that David, are you back?
I did. I'm sorry I crashed, but mercifully you still remained.
Okay. I think we ran out of questions. If there are questions that you think of later, you can always contact us or Luca Ascoli. Thank you very much. This was Sephardic World, brought to you by the Sephardic Genealogical Society. As always, we thank our patrons who are with us here, and we hope to see you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thank you.